Welcome to The Aging Adventure, brought to you by Legacy Retirement Communities in Lincoln. I'm Dale Johnson. Joining me every Saturday morning on KFOR for The Adventure is John Kopetsky, Executive Director of Legacy Terrace at 5700 Fremont Street, and Kathy Blythe, an award-winning alum of KFOR with genuine devotion to Lincoln's seniors. John, good morning. Kathy, good morning.
Good morning, Dale.
Good morning, and I'll take it from here, Dale. Our guest today on The Aging Adventure is someone the KFOR audience has come to know and trust since 1985, when he came to Lincoln from our sister station, KRGI in Grand Island. Today's spotlight is on KFOR News Director Dale Johnson, who originally hails from Holdridge and has had an amazing career in radio and really an amazing life. John and I both have a long history with Dale, whose Aging Adventure has had some tremendous high points and also some extraordinary challenges. Dale, thanks so much for being on the other side of the microphone today.
Kathy and John, this will be fun.
Take us back to a date I know you'll never forget, March 20th, 2016.
Oh, it was a beautiful day. First day of spring. I wanted to go to the grocery store to pick up some items for lunch later in the day, and I had a motorcycle that was new to me, had it a couple of weeks, and I wanted to ride it as much as I could because in August of 2016, my brother and I had planned a trip to Sturgis, to the motorcycle rally, something on our bucket list. So I was wanting to get as much experience as I could. I headed to the store on 27th Street, and when I got to Stockwell, traffic had stopped so a pedestrian could cross the street. And when traffic resumed, a 16-year-old who was heading in the opposite direction did not see me and turned into my motorcycle, hitting me on the left leg. I managed to keep the bike up, hit the curb, flipped over the handlebars and onto the grassy easement there. And I consider that to be my first lucky point because, number one, I landed on grass. Number two, I stopped short of a tree that's there. So it could have been much, much worse. When I had got my wits about me, and there weren't many wits left at that point, I looked around to see if the 16-year-old was still there, the driver of the car. And he was, and as I made that pan from left to right, I could see that the sole of my shoe on my left leg turned upwards, so I knew something was wrong. Saw that the driver was still there, and I began then to give my phone number, my address, my name, Kimberly's name, phone number, address, my son Blaze. And I repeated those over and over again, and I can remember consciously thinking, I cannot pass out. Because if I pass out, I'm no use to anyone. No one knows who to call. No one knows if I have any medical conditions that need to be addressed that weren't obvious. And so I kept repeating them over and over and over again. And it worked because someone heard my phone number and my wife's number and called her. And she was on the phone when the ambulance passed by. We were living at that point on a time near Van Dorn Street where she watched the ambulance go by, hearing the sirens as she's on the phone being told that my husband has been in a motorcycle crash. Fortunately, I was very near a couple of fire stations, medic units. They responded quickly, and the first paramedic out of the ambulance looked at me and said, "Get a tourniquet on that leg." And thank goodness he did, because had he not done that, I learned later that I was about 3 minutes from dying. I was losing so much blood on the grass there at 27th and Stockwell that I would probably very likely have died had they not gotten there sooner and had that tourniquet not been placed on my leg.
So Dale, in the 24 hours that came after that, were you completely sedated? Did you understand what was going on? Did you understand you had lost your leg, or was that later?
No, that was later, Kathy. I woke up, I'm not sure how many hours later, but I do know that there was a span of time where the vascular surgeon did everything he could to try to save my leg, taking it up an inch at a time to try to find. It was broken in 7 places between my knee and the ankle. After about 4 hours worth of trying, the vascular surgeon came into my wife and said, "You're going to have to make a decision. Either amputate or we'll try to save it. He may have what they call a drop foot or a partially functional leg." And she said, "No, he doesn't want that. Go for the amputation." And she made the right choice. I remember waking up from anesthesia. She's at the end of the bed. I look at her. I look at my leg. We look back at each other and we start crying. And I'm not saying this to be dramatic, but that is really the only time that we were in the hospital where I really cried about the loss of my leg. Because I remember the very next day when I was basically off sedation, I asked the nurses to come in and I said, "I want you to help me get out of this bed because I want to walk." I can't learn to walk if I'm lying on my back. And they did just that. They rigged up a device that is used for people in my situation, and I leaned over it. I had a broken shoulder, too, so I couldn't lean on my left shoulder. We went around the ER. I wanted to go twice. They recommended I go once. They're smarter than I am. And so we circled the ER once, and that was the first time I had been out of bed, which was the day after being admitted to ER.
So, Dale, how long were you in the hospital after that before you were able to come home?
11 days. When I got home, I knew I had a clock ticking. I had some short-term disability that would kick in. So I had 3 months. And once I got myself oriented to being at home, I can remember getting in a wheelchair, and we lived on a hill at the time, and I can remember going to the base of that hill, putting in my earbuds, and wheeling myself, pushing myself up that hill because I had to do everything that I possibly could to get stronger. The only way you can walk after losing a leg is to have your core strong enough to be able to hold you up. And so I did, and I would go up the hill and roll down the hill and then go up again and down, doing everything I could, exercises then, and going to rehab, physically leaving the house and going to rehab. I would drive there myself. Fortunately, with my left leg gone, I could still drive, have all the limbs necessary in order to drive. And so I'm out of the hospital. I'm doing rehab. I'm back to work at KFOR 3 months to the day on the first day of summer after the crash.
We're hearing Dale Johnson's amazing story, and we'll have more of this amazing story to come in just a little bit. You're listening to The Aging Adventure on KFOR, brought to you by the Legacy Retirement Communities. We're back on The Aging Adventure, brought to you by the Legacy Retirement Communities. And today, John and I have the great pleasure of visiting with our dear friend, Dale Johnson, about his road back from a very, very tragic motorcycle accident that almost took his life back in 2016. And Dale, before the break, we talked a lot of the specifics about what happened in the first days and weeks and months. Let's talk a little bit about the people who reached out to you, which in turn has led you to reach out to others. You had some very important phone calls because you had some pretty, you went to a pretty dark place, and who could blame you?
Yeah, at the age of 58 or 59, Kathy, you never expect to be told that you have a 7% chance of surviving a crash, and that was my case. One of the first calls while I was in the hospital came from former governor, former U.S. Senator Bob Kerrey, who lost a portion of his foot in the Vietnam War as a Navy SEAL. And we're talking, and his advice was 3 words that I have never, ever forgotten, and I go back to them constantly, and that is, do not settle. And I didn't really know what he meant, but it's do not settle for a diagnosis that seems not where your mind and your physicality is right now. Do not settle for a prosthetic that is good enough. Do not settle for a time to advance your prosthetic to something with higher technology. Just do not settle. And I haven't. And it started with my rehab. I didn't seek advice from a doctor thinking that it was the right time to get a prosthetic, which was about 4 months after my crash. I just literally went to Google and said, prosthetist in Lincoln, Nebraska, and found one, went there, said, I think I'm ready for a prosthetic. What do you think? He said, let's do it. And so I, on my own, sought out what I thought I needed. I did some research on the types, got his advice. And so I had my left leg prosthetic about 4 months afterwards, and it came just in time because we had planned the previous year to go to Peru. My wife's daughter's husband is from Peru, and it hadn't been back since he was 17, so we planned this reunion of sorts. So we are planning to go to Machu Picchu in Peru in September. My crash is in March. So you do the math, that's about 5.5 months, and I made it to the top. Not only made it to the top of Machu Picchu, but then we climbed other Inca ruins, and it was just an amazing, a memorable spiritual trip, really, to the point where when we came back, Kimberly and I decided that it would be a good time to see if we could reach out to the young man who hit me and took my leg. Parents said it was all right, so we met at a coffee shop. He walked in and it was awkward. Parents were there. It was awkward. We all shared some tears. And there got to a point where I leaned over the table and I said, you hit the right guy. I didn't die. I drove here. I'm back to work. I'm going to drive home. I'm going to hug my grandkids. You hit the right guy. Now just be a better driver. In my mind, I thought he was, you think about March and April in the life of a teenager, they're probably planning prom and getting ready for the end of the school year. This young man had his own demons, and he was fighting his own demons. He sold the car, was having trouble with school, sought out counselors. I said, just get a good night's sleep and move on, because I'm moving on. And that was the conversation that, and I haven't seen him since. I haven't reached out to him since. They haven't reached out to me since. I think it was just a good way to put some closure on it, Kathy.
Well, and I know that you waited. I mean, when you first thought about doing it, you weren't ready to do it.
No.
You waited until that was just right moment. And I just wanted to add back to the Machu Picchu story that somebody with two legs who accomplishes that is like the big wow moment of their life. And for you to have done it under those circumstances is just boggles my mind, Dale. I mean, what you are just. I don't know. I've heard your story a million times, and I'm sitting here sobbing.
Dale, how did you, in this remarkable journey, how did you get past the why me, Lord feelings and just get the ability to move on? Because it's the fact that you did so is incredible, but that must have been a struggle.
Yeah, some of it came from a book from Michael J. Fox. It's called Always Looking Up. And in it, he says, take the action, let go of the results. And so if you start that step towards something you want to accomplish, just let go of the results. Don't think it's going to work. Don't think it's going to fail. Don't think that you're not capable of doing it. Don't think that you're going to be Superman and accomplishment. Just take the action and then let go of the results. And the universe, or whatever spiritual label you have, will make sure that it happens. That was the advice that I took as I did a lot of reading, did a lot of YouTube, TEDx videos, sought out a lot of inspiration from people who were in far worse shape than me and had come a lot farther than me. So I just immersed myself in some positivity.
You haven't given up motorcycling, have you?
No, I haven't. Another person that comes to mind that helped me get to that point, John, is Bob White. He's now retired, track coach at Lincoln High. Bob had a much more serious crash incident on the interstate and went through a huge ordeal, much more than I did, to have a prosthetic on his leg. But we met for lunch at downtown, and in order to get to that spot, I needed to cross the street, and it would have been the first time I'd ever crossed a street using my prosthetic. And so I get there. I can remember taking every step, worrying about falling down. Get there, and I said, Bob, that's the first street I've ever crossed. And he could see it was a little emotional for him. He says, well, you're here, aren't you? And he just, as a matter of fact, yeah, I am here. And so that was, it was subtle, but it was huge for me, because it instilled in me the confidence to be able to go on then and continue something that I love. Because in that decision, my wife could see every time a motorcycle went by, I would respond to the sound. And so she knew that I continued to have an interest in it. And we had a real brief conversation one time, and she said, do you fear getting on a motorcycle? I said, no. Do you still like motorcycles? Would you still ride one? I said, yes. So she said, never make a decision out of fear. Base your decision on love. And so I did. And I love motorcycles. I continue to ride. And it's served me well ever since, John. So I still do it.
We have much, much more to talk with Dale about his incredible journey back from that day in March of 2016, and we'll do that right after this break on The Aging Adventure on KFOR. We're back on The Aging Adventure on KFOR, brought to you by the Legacy Retirement Communities, talking with KFOR's Dale Johnson about his motorcycle accident in 2016.
Dale, I remember at one of the fundraisers for you, early on, I was having a conversation with your son, Blaze, and I said, Blaze, please tell me that you're going to ask your dad to never get back on a motorcycle again. And he said, I would never do that. I couldn't do that. I won't I won't ask him not to do that. And I think his thinking was too that you would do what you wanted to do, and you did, with the blessing of your wife too.
Well, he and I have that relationship. I never tell him what to do now as an adult. I may not agree with it, but he's an adult. He can make his own decisions, and I think he realized that in me. And I tell him stories, and I can see that he's genuinely interested in it, but just in my expression of joy of having gone, I don't get into details because he's not a motorcycle guy. And I have taken some trips. By the way, we did take that Sturgis trip. It wasn't in 2016. It was 2018. So I filled that bucket list, checked that one off with my brother. The year after that, I have a cousin who lives on a lake in Oklahoma, Grand Lake, Oklahoma. And I traveled to Oklahoma and saw her for a few days. Following year, I joined a radio colleague, and we went to Big Springs, Arkansas, and spent a week in Arkansas. And I just returned from a week-long trip with a radio buddy of ours, Dave Hillegas. We went to Minnesota and toured the northern shore of Lake Superior and went all the way up to Canada. And we were in mid-50-degree weather when you were back here in Lincoln at about 103. So my timing was perfect on that. But I'm also planning, I would really like to go to Zion National Park in Utah. I've never been to the Smoky Mountains. I'd like to see some of the Smoky Mountains. I've also never been to parts of the southern shore of Lake Superior, which is just a beast. Lake Superior is just should be a national treasure because it's just beautiful. So that's my return trip, and each one of them have been special with the people that I ride with. When I take a ride, I need someone to share the experience with, and so I like to travel with motorcycle companions when I go.
It clearly brings you great joy, and it was fun to see your posts about the trip you just took with Dave Hillegas. You have a story that John and I have not heard yet that has something to do with the Gretna Mall. So
Right.
Do share it with all of us, Dale.
My wife, who has not ridden a motorcycle very much, wanted to sit on the back of the new one that I have. I've purchased a different one for me that's a little more comfortable. For me and for her. And so we took a trip to Omaha, and on the way back we stopped at the Gretna Mall, and while I was tucking the bike away, a gentleman came up and commented about it, and I told him my story, showed him my leg, and a tear came down his eye. And my wife shared the story about making decisions based upon either fear or love, and then tears started rolling down from both eyes. He says, I don't know how either of you do it. And he looked at her and said, is this all right with you? And she says, he's happy. And he continued to cry, and he gave us both hugs. And so we wished him well, and we will probably never see him again. But that's another story that's come into my life. People come into my life on motorcycle trips, when I'm in the mall. I just have opportunities to engage with people that I don't know if I would have had before. Radio is a gregarious. You've got to be a little out there in order to be in this business. So talking to people isn't a fearful thing for me. But I'm noticing that people are coming to me. I must just have this aura of positivity, I guess. But I feel very lucky. One of the things I'm going to do, and I'll do this as we wrap up, is the next tattoo I get is going to be the word grateful. And it will be on the outside of my left-hand index finger so that I always see it when I have my hand on the steering wheel of a car, when I have it on my motorcycle handlebars, when I'm washing dishes. It will be the word grateful on the outside of my left-hand index finger to just give me a little reminder that you're still on this earth. Be grateful for that.
I love that, Dale. And you've been always so quick to say that despite this being a catastrophic situation to begin with, that you've received more gifts from it than that have been given to you than what was taken away.
Kathy, I tell people that I'm a lucky man, and they look at me with a confused look. How can the loss of a leg be interpreted as lucky? And I said, you know what? The only thing I lost was a leg. I'm still the same person. I just don't have a leg.
but you have a lot of things that you've given to a lot of people through the years since the accident, Dale. It's just amazing, your own internal recovery, and now what you're doing, reaching out to everybody from people who've had injuries to the man at the mall in Gretna. I mean, you graced their lives in one way or another, and that may not have happened without that March day in 2016.
I agree, John. I agree.
You're just an inspiration to all of us, Dale. And we will look forward to you being on the other side of the microphone next week. But we were so grateful that you consented to do the interview with John and me today, because your story is one that should be told over and over again. And so thank you for that, Dale. John, do you want to tell everybody how to get in touch with the Legacy Retirement Communities?
You can view our website, legacyretirement.com, or the telephone, the old-fashioned telephone, 402-436-3000.
Dale Johnson, John Kopesky, and Kathy Blythe, thanking you so much for joining us today on the Aging Adventure on KFOR, brought to you proudly by the Legacy Retirement Communities.